Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium's second in a series of webinars on the Supply Chain Management Readiness Assessment. And in this webinar, we're going to focus on discovering your strengths and weaknesses in your organization using our Supply Chain Management Readiness Assessment. This is our Tier 2 assessment, and it takes into account 5 to 8 stakeholders in your organization and gaining that cross-functional alignment and insight. Again, this is the second webinar of a series of 5 webinars, and our next webinar will be on January 19th, and that will focus on supply chain management industry benchmark comparison and process improvement prioritization of your company. My name is Jim DeVries, founder of Enhance International Group and a partner of the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium. Greg and I have been working together on this for a couple of years now, and I'll be the host of today's webinar. We also have Connor Fitcham, who will be supporting us in the background. Thank you, Connor. Also, please have your questions, place them in the chat, and please do participate in the survey that we just talked about, pollev.com, Greg Schlegel 910. You'll see the instructions in the chat. Featured with today, we have Greg Schlegel. Greg will be sharing his vast expertise. Greg is one of the original founders of Supply Chain Risk and Resiliency and former president of Apex, now ASCM. Greg founded the consortium in 2010. Greg is a celebrated speaker and esteemed author of the book, Supply Chain Risk Management, an Emerging Discipline, published in 2015. Greg, a few words of introduction.
You bet. Thanks, Jim. Great to be here with you today to chat again about one of our passions, supply chain management and risk. We'll talk about the consortium in a minute. We've been in business for 12 years, so we'll give you a thumbnail sketch there. Again, I've taught supply chain risk management at Lehigh for 10 years. I still teach ERM, Enterprise Risk Management, at Villanova University here in the States. Spent 8 years with IBM as a supply chain executive consultant and practice lead. Spent 30 years, maybe like many of you, as a supply chain exec for a couple of Fortune 100 companies. And again, I've taught supply chain management at 6 different universities here in the States, and was president of Apex, now ASCM, back in the late 90s. So back to you, Jim.
Thanks, Greg. I think we'll just go ahead and get started. Greg, you go ahead and go through the consortium.
Yeah, sure. We said we'd give you a little thumbnail sketch. This is kind of who we are and what we do. On the right-hand side, you see 3 pillars, kind of education, consulting, and software as a service. Those are our members. We're still growing. We have 2 new members coming in a couple of weeks at the end of the year. The quick profile is we have about 31 companies now. That's about 1,500 supply chain risk professionals in all those organizations. Those companies bring tools, techniques, methodologies, and computer solutions to help us identify, assess, mitigate, and manage risks in the supply chain. On the left-hand side, it's basically what we provide. We have 5 areas. Online education, we have 2 certificate courses that have been going on for about 4 years now. You get a certificate from the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium and some of our education partners that you can see. One is a basic course in supply chain risk and resilience. The other is geared towards service and public healthcare, which we'll talk about more today. We do coaching and consulting for companies. We bring platform solutions to do heavy lifting for visibility, risk alerts, and so forth. And then today we're going to talk about one of our supply chain management online readiness assessment tools. We'll talk in detail about Tier 2. The second tool is down the bottom. That's a prescriptive online supply chain risk and resiliency tool, 90-day action plan. It looks at, it evaluates your risk maturity, your risk appetite, and your risk culture, which is really your operational propensity. And it uses a host of different algorithms. So that's who we are and what we provide. Jim?
Thanks, Greg. A little bit background on Enhanced International Group. We're a group of passionate experts to guide you through your transformations. We provide self-generating and self-funding results. We have over vetted 50 consultants, consulting companies, and SaaS providers to support you in enabling your enterprise. EIG serves as that master integrator to make sure we bring the best and the brightest companies to the forefront to support you in your efforts. Our team is dedicated to empowering your organization's workforce by leveraging EIG's partner tenured thought leadership expertise. Our goal is to meet and exceed your expectations with predictable, sustainable, and repeatable 90-day self-funding programs. Reviewing the bicycle slide, which really comes into play not only for EIG, but will come into play today in this webinar because it's really linking strategic, tactical, and operational perspectives. On the strategy wheel, which is the drive wheel, the strategy wheel drives us, and for us, we're driving supply chain management as a priority, and tactics is our tactical operations, and execution is our day-to-day execution. Einstein put it very well with his quote, "Life is like a bicycle." So let's get moving here. So let's start with the webinar assessment webinar series. Again, this is the second webinar, discovering your strengths and weaknesses relative to your best in class. Again, from that strategic, tactical, and operational strength levels that we'll be talking about today. And then tier 3 is on the industry benchmark and prioritization. So as you become more mature in supply chain management, tier 3 becomes more apparent in the value that it provides you. And then tier 4 is the playbook, and 5 is going to be this capstone webinar. With that, again, this lays out all our tiers. What we'll be covering today in tier 2 is that best-in-class ranking at the strategic, tactical, and operational levels from a best-in-class BIC perspective. And we'll have observations of performance gaps and high areas of risk, or simply put, your strengths and weaknesses of your organization. In this tier, you'll get 6 hours of consulting. The tier 2 deliverables, Greg will bring us through. Greg?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jim. Our focus today is on our tier 2 portion of the supply chain management readiness assessment. Up in the top right, it is really a cross-functional team exercise, folks. If you've been with us over the year now with our tier 1, tier 2 webinars and so forth, you will understand that tier 1 is potentially a one-person type of assessment. Tier 2 breaks out of that, and it's a cross-functional team. So we advocate in tier 2 that you acquire 5 to 8 of your executives to go through the assessment. What does it look like on the bottom left? That's a picture of tier 1 and tier 2 charts. All right. Tier 1, if you've been with us, I'll just say there's 13 tenets there. You can see they're color coded. The blue are strategic, the red are tactical, and the army green are operational tenets. Then you can see the as is condition when a company fulfills and answers the questions. You see the black line. Remember, the farther away you are from the center of the chart, that's indicative of less mature process maturity and higher risk. And so you can see the black as an example of a company's answers. And then what we do is we superimpose on top of the as is condition the strategic, tactical, and operational pictures as well. Blue is strategic, red is tactical, and the green again is operational. So you kind of get a twofer from tier 2. What are the insights? You get a relative picture of your best in class. Remember, the closer you are into the center, that is indicative of being best in class, regardless of industry. Where are your strengths? Where are your weaknesses? What does it mean to your supply chain maturity? Where do we focus, and how do we go about improving? That's kind of the insights you receive. Sorry, I'll put my picture back on. The deliverables, it acts as a benchmarking vehicle to evaluate supply chain improvements, future supply chain improvements, establishes an objective as is, which are the black lines, provides direction within the tool. We can talk about that, including coaching. It provides an initial risk level assessment from low, medium, and high, and it provides an observation for you in terms of looking at performance gaps and maybe some high risk areas in your supply chain processes. So with that, we'll give you a thumbnail sketch, and Jim will pose some questions for you all.
So our survey question is: rank and order the industry that you're most closely represent. We have the results here, and then I'm sorry, we have some responses in the chat window. Just want to recognize those. Appreciate that. We had one for industrials. We had a healthcare. We have a retail person. So I think we're going to go with healthcare, and maybe next time we'll put together a retail case study. We have done the industrials before, and if there's any questions on industrials, we'll be more than glad to follow up on that also. With that, Greg, any comments about the complexion of our audience?
No, we well, essentially what we do is we like to see what the complexion is, you know, in terms of industry sectors, because we cover every industry. We have hundreds and hundreds of data points. We asked this question, one, to get a complexion, and two, to, as Jim said, to essentially pick what persona and caselet we will show you today to be meaningful to the bulk of the audience. So
great. Thanks, Greg. And thanks everybody for participating. Really appreciate it. So with that, we'll get to the agenda finally here on discovering your strengths and weaknesses. We're going to start out with the compelling reasons to promote supply chain readiness. Then we'll provide some development of the background development of the supply chain readiness assessment, where we came up with this and why. And then we'll go through the definitions, strategic, tactical, and operational levels we call STO. And then we'll get into some case studies, and we'll do the NGO healthcare case study. And then we'll get into mature supply chain processes to ensure survivability, what's in it for you, and how do you sell this to your organization is really number 5 is about, and then how to get started with this second of the tier. So we're going to kick it off with the compelling reasons to promote supply chain readiness. So the first thing we'll talk about is what we call the Venn diagram of putting together supply chain risk management, network design, and right sizing. And we really see the intersection of these 3 things coming together now more than ever, with us living in this scalable or in this VUCA world. And the real question is, how do we scale in this scale for growth in a predictable way in a VUCA world? And that's really the real challenge here. And, you know, just as a recap, V is volatility caused by the COVID, uncertainty. The U is uncertainty for the root cause of the event. when it's unknown. The C is complexity of their supply chains, that they're getting more and more complex every day. And ambiguity is, we don't really know what's next. So, these kinds of risk events are getting more transparent because we have more eyes on it than ever. Everybody can at least talk about supply chain. You can read it in the papers. We seem to be detecting these risk events, so they are more visible today. Everything from the latest COVID strain, to the next variant that's coming out right now, to the labor disputes on the docks, cyber threats, counterfeiting, weather-related risk events, hurricanes, snowstorms, flooding, earthquakes. All those types of things are more and more visible today than ever. But in summary, we are living in a transforming world, and it's stretching our network designs with new sourcing locations, rising inflation, and at the same time, we're seeing diminishing demand through right sizing. So we're trying to right size to fit what is the right demand. That's really the proverbial question that's out there right now. So we're stretching ourselves at both ends of the spectrum. So we're kind of, maybe you can view us like an accordion, like letting out air to create beautiful music, maybe, and maybe some not so beautiful music. So, it's up to us to build that orchestration so it does create beautiful music. And that's our overall challenge, to find your tipping point. So with that, I'll turn it over to Greg.
Yep, hold on. We have this is Jim gave you a glimpse of our new landscape and the tipping point. Here we have some insights from one of the friends of the consortium called the U.S. Conference Board. This is kind of a confidence level, CEO confidence chart. On the y-axis, it starts from low to high. On the x-axis are the years that they've been doing this, since 2000. So you can take a look. Everyone who has been in the business for a couple of years understands what the gray matter is. As you move from left to right on the chart, you get into 2022, 2023. What it's portending is there could be a rough couple of quarters for all of us ahead going forward. So we wanted to share that with you. A bit of a risk. All right. Next, we have a sense of what we see on the street, in our end-to-end supply chain landscape. So we thought we'd share this with you, more or less causes of what's going on right now. Increase in inflation, we think, will diminish demand across many sectors. We think that's pretty straight away. Second, what else is happening? Many sectors are now canceling. The 2x, 3x, 4x orders that we all put together way back when, and that is producing an imbalance in supply and demand. There's more. Companies who ordered 2x, 3x, 4x are now receiving that supply finally through the backlog of the supply chain, and that is now considered excess inventory. That's what's happening when it comes to attempting to cancel those orders, and now they're coming to fruition. It's good for the consumers, might be bad for the retailers, because they're going to have to discount the excess inventory quite large. And the primary impact, at least for retail, if you're in retail, especially retail apparel, we think there's another couple thousand store closings coming in 2023. There'll be a lot of M&A as well. So not the best picture in the world. We're not trying to scare you. We're just trying to give you a sense of what we see coming into 2023. Finally, we'll finish this section with some motivations to use the supply chain management readiness assessment. There's a couple. Maybe use it, to create some winning strategies within your supply chain and enterprise. We think it also helps feed your annual operating plan or your budgeting process. It will transform your supply chain processes for better productivity. We've seen it. It'll boost operational health by identifying maybe your skills gaps, in certain supply chain processes, improve those skill gaps and build better capabilities. So the net on the bottom, we think it fosters an image of your as is capabilities of all those 13 tenants in your supply chain. And it does provide you a roadmap to achieving perhaps a competitive advantage. So with that, I'll turn it back to Jim.
Great, Greg. Thank you. And our next section is focused on the supply chain readiness background development, how we came up with this. And what we want to do first is define what supply chain management landscape looks like. And here we have an end-to-end supply chain, starting with building your products and then working around clockwise to purchasing and production planning and scheduling these new products. And then you're monitoring and reporting on that production. And then your management decision support is set up to support those new products you're generating. And of course, you have a sales team pulling in those sales to generate and grow your business. And then you build your product lines and your product service. And then, of course, customer management after that. And then you're more like pulling through here. You're just making sure your distribution is meeting your customer demands and requirements and your order fulfillment and material inventory management. Things like VMI is all set up to make sure that you're always fulfilling your supply chain. You have logistics set up with your 3PLs and your carriers to make sure that you're gaining the inbound and outbound on your both sides of it. And then you have supplier management, making sure that you're set up with your suppliers from a local or global perspective. So that's just a little bit perspective on supply chain. So now we're all speaking the same language as supply chain. And with that, I'll turn it over to Greg.
Yep, you bet. We thought we'd try to give you a quick genesis of the SCM assessment tool, because we're not sure that everyone on the call has been through our webinar series. So this is actually Tier 1 on the left. The tool was born out of the first of a kind supply chain risk management course at Lehigh University 10 years ago. It was so well received that we took it on the road rather quickly. The tool has been operating around the globe for about 10 years. We've utilized it in classrooms, in our workshops, in our webinars, and even in client engagements. And we've now upgraded the tool within an LMS, a learning management system platform. So on the left-hand side, just for your edification, a quick recap. All right, we've put 30 years plus of supply chain and 12 years of risk management experience. We developed this tool that provides 2 assessments. As you can see, there are 13 tenets. We said the blue are strategic, the red are tactical, and the army green are operational. All right, we think that these 13 encompass good end-to-end supply chain processes. The star chart is a maturity model, and it depicts the maturity of your company's supply chain processes, where the lower the number closer to the center, the more mature that supply chain process is. As you go through the questions of discovery, all right, you can see a company's response, which is the black line. Remember, the farther away the responses are from the center, the less mature the supply chain process. Secondarily, we developed risk levels within the maturity model. The farther from the center, the higher the inherent risk you have in those supply chain processes. Green, you can see the green circle, that's exemplars, it's low risk. The orange is medium risk, and then anything near or beyond the red circle, we call it the ring of fire. That's where you have a very immature supply chain process, and therefore you have quite high inherent risks. So with that, again, remember, The tool measures your supply chain process maturity and your inherent risk. All right. So let's take a look. We'll take a look at some more details of the tool. This is the activity profile of the SCM assessment tool over the years. All right. Essentially, on the right-hand side, we have 10 years and about 1,000 companies assessed over a 10-year period. About 500 MBA students have utilized the tool. We know that 15 different universities around the globe are using the tool in their classroom. We have over 3,000 operations supply chain professionals utilizing the tool in 10 years. About 200 or 300 financial risk professionals have utilized the tool, and then several companies across almost every industry sector. On the left-hand side is essentially what it looks like when you get into it. There are questions, there are tenets. This one happens to be agility up in the top left. What you basically see is 3 little snippets for that particular question. What you do is you decide which of those snippets best represent your as-is condition associated with that question. Once you decide that, then we ask you to select and pick a number indicative of the degree within that basic question and snippet. And so that's very simple sliding scale. You look for the snippet that best indicates your as-is condition, give us a relative degree and a number, and then hit the button and go to the next question. So with that, I'll turn it back to Jim.
Thanks, Greg. Next, we'll get into the supply chain readiness, strategic, tactical, and operational definitions. First, we'll talk about each of the 13 tenets from a manufacturing perspective that Greg already covered. We'll just get into them a little bit detailed. And when you complete the survey, the level 1, you'll get detailed definitions for each of the 13 tenets, depending if you take the manufacturing or the healthcare version. So kicking us off here on the strategic level, we have 3 tenets. On the number 1 is leadership. That's the culture of your leadership. And number 2 is your balanced scorecard, those 4 perspectives: financial, customer, internal processes, and learning and growth. That's the second tenet. And the third tenet is intentional redundancies. Do you overtly develop and eliminate sources of supply? So how do you set up your overall network? So those are the top 3 from a strategic perspective. From a tactical perspective, we have these 5 tenets. We start off with demand management. How do you manage demand and your customer base? Number 5 is industry practices. What type of industry do you operate in? And that's looking at the best practices aligned to your industry. Information systems. What level of sophistication do you have in your IT systems and your digitization strategy? Number 7 is integrated supply chain. Do you take in an end-to-end perspective in your supply chain, or do you compartmentalize your supply chain? The next is risk mitigation planning. Do you overtly try to develop risk mitigation plans? Are they do they go across your enterprise, or are they departmentalized again? Your third level is the operational level. And here we have our 5 remaining tenets: supply chain or supply purchasing. What does your supply base look like? Where are you getting it? Is it global? Is it local? S&OP processes. What does your sales and operation planning look like? This is a hot topic, especially today, especially when there are tools now to support in this. And data is more available than ever before to build more resilient S&OP processes. The third in this area, number 11, is adaptive manufacturing. How mature are your manufacturing processes? And then number 12 is logistics transportation. Do you manage your own logistics, or do you use a 3PL a 4PL carrier, for instance. And then agility, how agile is your entire supply chain? So with that, we're going to move on to Greg and a service perspective. Greg?
You bet. As we mentioned in the consortium introduction, we maintain two supply chain management assessment tools. One is manufacturing, which Jim just profiled for you. And the other is service industry and a focus on, excuse me, public healthcare. So we just wanted to kind of differentiate the two from a service industry point of view, from an Apex ASCM point of view, out of their dictionary. All right, in the broadest sense or in the narrowest sense, an organization that provides an intangible product like medical or legal, okay, service. In the broadest sense, according to ASCM, all organizations are considered service except for farming, mining, and manufacturing. So you can see down the bottom right, all the potential service area arenas, including what we call NGO and public healthcare. So we wanted to just differentiate that we have two specific assessment tools that we're talking about here for Tier 2. Next, we'll finish up this section with a profile of the service tenants. And Jim went through all 13 tenets, and the only real big change, folks, is number 11, which essentially talks about and focuses on your supply chain processes as opposed to adaptive and or how do you manufacture the product. We understand that service folks do not manufacture product. They move things, all right? They move material back and forth throughout their supply chain. So essentially, that is the big difference. There are some nuances in terms of the questions in each one of the tenets, but the big modification and change for this service tool is asking questions about your movement and your supply chain processes. So with that, I'll turn it back to Jim again.
Thanks, Greg. So when we kicked it off earlier, we talked about the strategic, tactical, and operational levels using this bicycle slide, as we call it. And this lines up very well with our offering here, where we, the organization performance ranking is relative to best-in-class benchmark. We align to the best-in-class performance segments, the 4 best-in-class segments that Greg mentioned before, and we'll talk about a little bit later. The tenets, groupings, performance, strategic, tactical, and operational. Is your approach balanced? Is your organization focused on the top-down strategy, operational, or are you more of a bottoms-up organization? How do you lead and guide your organization through supply chain management, operational decisions, and tactical and strategic decisions? Do you provide observations of performance gaps in high-risk areas relative to best-in-class? How well are you positioned there? When it comes to consensus and disagreement, our survey will help identify where you have your gaps, and will be able to tell you where you need to focus relative to yourselves, between each other, in your business that you're focused on, and relative to best in class, so we can help coach and guide you through that. And the beauty of this assessment is, you're taking about 15, 20 minutes of or 30 minutes of an executive's time, and the result is a very quantifiable way of looking at where to focus and where not to focus in your supply chain to make it better. And what we espouse is that we want to provide that single supply chain management language aligned to the goals of your organization, and gain that or your organization's stakeholders alignment. And again, this should be focused on at a product line or a business level. And we have a plethora of folks that we recommend bringing in. These are key leaders and perspectives across your organization that, when we talked about that end-to-end supply chain, we included those folks that are involved in that, and not only executing that, but supporting that, like finance and IT. So it's everything from procurement, manufacturing, sales, customer service. All these types of folks do play a big role in supply chain. It's really important to gain those perspectives. We understand it's very difficult often to gain those perspectives, get that into a room. And that's why we designed this part of the survey, is to help you through that process to gain alignment quickly. Again, what you get out of the survey is the responses from at a strategic level, a tactical level, and an operational level. And the scoring, we score the average and the variation. And of course, the variation tells you where you have disagreement or agreement, consensus, and the overall average will say where you're, which of these are stronger than another. Depending on where you are in your journey, you may need to have more of a strategic perspective, but if you have a strategic perspective too long, then your operational type processes may be lacking. So it's all about finding that balance for you on where you are for your company and what you're trying to achieve in the next in your next evolution as you grow your company. With that, Greg?
Yep. We wanted to give you additional context, folks, on strategic, tactical, and operational horizons, just from a classical good supply chain 101. We put together a graph left to right. On the left is strategic planning. You can see some of the elements associated with strategic planning. The key aha here is down the bottom, strategic time frame. You know, this is what we want you to remember. Strategic planning, anywhere from 1 to 5 years, probably a little shorter now because of our VUCA environment. But classically, what you learn in supply chain certification is 1 to 5 years. The tactical element of planning, you can see the elements that are associated with tactical planning. That has a different time horizon on the bottom. That is normally 1 to 18 months, which normally includes what we call S&OP, sales and operations planning, trying to balance demand and supply for your organization. In the middle, in the blue box, we call it operations. And we affectionately say this is the scheduling miracle. This is where it happens. The scheduling miracle happens here. This is basically master production scheduling, what we learned in supply chain certification. That operational time frame is completely different. That's 0 to 35 days. And then finally on the right, you'll see what we call MAKE, or MES, manufacturing execution systems. That's execution. That's your shop floor. That is hour by hour, minute by minute. The net is you essentially move from left to right in a somewhat linear form to essentially move product out to your customers through transportation, possibly even VMI, and more. So we wanted to give you a bit of a context on the time horizons of S, T, and O. All right. Next, and apologize for the dogs. They're okay, good. I can, it bothers me. All right. We just wanted to do a recap again of Tier 2. All right, just a real quick recap. On the left-hand side is what you get from Tier 1 and Tier 2. We went through all the tenets. We gave you definitions. You can see an as-is condition with the black lines. So you get an as-is profile of your maturity for supply chain process. You get a risk level. Remember, the farther away you are from the center, the higher the risks you are. And then you can see we superimpose the strategic, tactical, and operational averages to be indicative of your strengths. The blue is strategic, the red is tactical, and the green is operational. Now you can go over to the top right and you can see the same graph, but only just the tier 2 data. And this is kind of the differentiator as you move into tier 2, because now it profiles where your strengths are in terms of the 3 elements of strategic, tactical, and operational. So remember, the lower the numbers, the stronger the discipline. All right. And then we profile for you graphic pictures in terms of red, blue, and green. But essentially you get 2. You get tier 1 data, and then you get superimposed on top of that tier 2 segmentation and strength. So with that, I'll turn it back to Jim.
Thanks, Greg. And with that, we'll get into the next section on tool case studies. And we have a plethora of experience in this area. Some of the feedback we've gotten from CPG customers, supply chain readiness tool was very thorough and truly an end-to-end holistic assessment. The scope was much wider than they had initially anticipated. So that's from a CPG perspective. From electronics, they had 3 thoughts: provided a very comprehensive assessment, exposed potential areas for further investigation, and required that all stakeholders be involved. Again, that's one of the things that we really push, is getting that cross-functional involvement. From an industrial perspective, the assessment tool was the most complete supply chain management assessment method they'd seen in years, and he had been in business for 40 years. That's from a heavy industry and aerospace defense perspective. From a chemicals, the supply chain management tool, is critical factor in our business, in our industry. Before the assessment tool, we felt we had fairly robust supply chain, so maybe a little complacent there. But the tool was a terrific wake-up call for the supply chain team. And then from a healthcare perspective, we have quite a number of healthcare professionals taking the tool. They said it was a comprehensive program. The persona was very aligned to our organization, and definitely a tool that I would recommend to other staff members in our supply chain management and delivery pillar. God bless you, Greg. With that, we'll go into the ranking. We do have 4 ranking levels, as Greg talked about. The exemplars are at that inner ring, and that's less than a score of overall average of 3. Very few companies are able to get into that ring, but they've demonstrated embedding processes, supply chain tools, techniques, methodologies, solutions into their daily routines. And they're truly on that resilience and sustainability maturity stage. From a mainstream perspective, these are companies that have bought into supply chain. They believe in it. It's part of they want it to be part of their DNA. They're probably focused on sales, inventory, and operational predictability stage. They're probably focusing quite hard on that and refining that. But they've certainly seen the results of supply chain and reaped some bottom line benefits by having that. The apprentices are folks that are just getting started, and they may be isolated. They're in that 6.5 to 8.5 point area. They've started to increase their awareness through education, workshops, and online courses. We would expect that most of these folks they're just getting certified, whereas in the mainstream, probably everybody in the organization is certified. And supply chain management, different courses and the certifications. And the apprentices, they're trying to dig and scratch at funding, and that's a tough place to be in when you're in that apprentice stage and trying to round the troops to get everybody aligned. Or you could be in the ring of fire, which is where you really haven't got started, you're in the early foundational stage, and perhaps not even on the maturity model. So you may not even be doing any supply chain practices. And so we like to help companies move up through these stages. And with that, I think we're going to go through the NGO case study. I think we decided that. So I'm going to jump to that one right now. Bear with me. And Greg will bring us through this NGO healthcare case study. Greg?
You bet. Yep. Thanks, Jim. Again, we have a host of NGO public healthcare folks going through our courses, and then also utilizing the service public healthcare assessment tool. This is essentially a short little caselet. As you can see on the left-hand side, you can see the as is, the black line across the 13 tenets. And you can see at about, what is it, 6, maybe 7, 8 o'clock on the bottom left is supply chain processes. We talked about that. That's a big differentiator between the manufacturing tool. And you can see, again, remember, the farther away you are from the center, the less mature, the less mature your supply chain processes are. And then what you also see is the STO, the strategic, tactical, and operational calculations, quantifications superimposed on their chart. So what do they look like? They're in our terms a mainstream. You can see the numbers that are calculated. Jim went through the calculations in the previous slide. So we consider them mainstream in their industry. What are their focuses? What are their strengths and weaknesses? Looks to us like tactical is their basic strength. And then it moves from tactical to strategic, and then to operational. Kind of tightly aligned, all right, at the moment for this particular NGO. And then the industry benchmark, as we move further up the tiers of the solution, we've calculated them to be followers, and you can see the quantification. So you get your as-is condition, then you get a profile of your strengths and weaknesses from strategic, tactical, and operational point of view. You can then get an industry benchmark as well. And then I think what we do is we actually give them a few helpful hints from their assessment within the report from Tier 2. So some of those action plans, again, they're mainstream, they're tactical in terms of their biggest strength, and they're somewhat followers from a best-in-class industry point of view. Action plans look like this. Maybe they focus more on forward-looking issues for supply chain and risk. Maybe embrace some new global standards, get some framework into their supply chain arena, maybe develop supply chain and supply chain risk and resiliency talent, maybe acquire some more skills, go through education, get certified, and then maybe develop some KPIs and key risk indicators for both supply chain and risk going forward. So again, Jim gave you the assessment from the global NGO, so that was pretty encouraging to us. But that's kind of what a thumbnail sketch of what you receive when you go through Tier 2. Jim?
Back to you, Greg.
All right. Yeah, you bet. Sorry. We thought we'd go through and spend a little time on supply chain processes, mature supply chain processes, ensure survivability, kind of a thread that we've been talking about all through our series. We have a use case. That use case is Zara Retail. They've been around for a good long time. This was a 2015 assessment. Not only as is, but their STO focus as well. Back in 2015, they were operating very closely to an exemplar status. You can see how close their as is black line was to the circle, I guess it's orange circle or yellow circle. That's where the exemplars tend to operate. All right. And so one outlier, as you can see, about what, 5 o'clock on the chart, was IT systems. And at At this time in 2015, they had over 25 1970 like systems supporting their organization, and they were still muscling their way through, and they were still one of the best supply chain performance companies in their sector, and also from a risk management point of view. So they went through the analysis, they agreed with the analysis, and essentially they wanted an objective third party to come in and validate. We think they already knew that these systems were not going to support their 5-year vision to go 5G. And so they took all their cash, because they're a bank. Their cash conversion cycle at the moment is minus 45 days. They're a bank. They took that data, that money, and basically built a multi-million-dollar supply chain risk management war room. All right. We don't have a picture, but trust us, it's out there. They watch their supply chain around the globe 24/7, 365. And we wanted to share with you some of their stats. All right. From a best-in-class point of view, their number comes up to 3.01. That's pretty darn good. That's very close to being an exemplar in our opinion. And their main focus, strength was operational. Not surprising. But look how tight the other elements of STO are. Operational, then strategic, then tactical. They're all pretty good numbers, pretty low numbers, which basically says they were doing a lot of the right things the right way every day. So with that, we'll move on. Finish this section up with just a couple of threads on the readiness value proposition as we see them. This is what we've seen in the last 10 years using the tool with exemplars. They tend to run at a 7% cost advantage to their nearest competitor. They've increased their revenue anywhere from 10 to 20% top line revenue. They improve their cash flow anywhere from 10 to 30%. They increase the throughput through the supply chain, and that normally is indicative of increased top line revenue and more better customer service. And it does provide you a building block to what we think survive and thrive with the risks and the competition in the VUCA world. So on the bottom, you can kind of take a look at when you see the slides and get the PDF or the recording, you can take a look at it. We think this is a good primer to get you prepared to get into supply chain risk and resiliency in a big way. So with that, I'll turn it back to Jim.
Thanks, Greg. And we'll talk about how to get started on the supply chain risk readiness assessment. Of course, the tier 1 is our last webinar, which emphasizes how, are you strong and weak in different areas or perspective. It gives you can take the survey, your colleagues can take the survey just to get warmed up as to what it is. When you start seeing yourself agreeing or disagreeing, that's when tier 2 becomes more interesting. Again, it is free. You can just click on this link or go to the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium's website and find it. We'll also have the link as part of the webinar output. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Greg for tier 2. That's what we're here to talk about. Greg?
Yeah, you bet. Well, this is just a recap again. Folks, remember tier 2 is a cross-functional team exercise. We push the issue of 5 to 8 execs. You can see the chart again. We're not going to go through the chart. We've talked about the insights and the deliverables. The last thread on this is tier 2 is not free. It's $2,500 for your company to get in and exercise and receive tier 1, tier 2, all the insights and the deliverables. So with that, we wanted to give you some helpful hints. If you're thinking about tier 2, pick a company, pick a company and or a product line, like a division or a product line that's familiar to you. Keep it small. Start small. Think about a product line that maybe has 10 to 15 stock keeping units. All right, get in there, log in, enter the product line, tell the system whether you're a manufacturer or a service organization, walk through the 92 questions by yourself or with a colleague. And we say that tier 2 is basically 5 to 8. We want as many folks as you can muster in tier 2. And then when complete, you hit the submit button, you access the chart, you have access to the answers, and you do get a report from us as well with additional insights. And so we just wanted to kind of finish up with the tier 1 update. We launched the new program August 1. It's being leveraged by our licensees and our partners and other folks across multiple industries. We have over 100 active users in the system today in tier 1 as of 11/26. Very encouraging. And again, we go across almost all sectors. Those are just a smattering. We have many, many other sectors. So very encouraging in terms of individuals getting into the free tier 1 to exercise the tool and come up with an as is condition. So essentially, our takeaways are this. There's tier 1 on the left. Contact us if you have any questions regarding any of the tiers. Let us know if you go through tier 1. Let us know how you felt about the process, who you collaborated with, if anyone. If you had any surprises, let us know what those surprises are. We'd like to hear them. And then you can actually ping us and find us at the website, my email address and Jim's email address as well. And remember, tier 1 is free. So with that, we'll finish up. Just to give you our offerings again, we're totally on demand, whether we didn't convey that, but we're on demand. We have 2 education courses that use the tool. We have the supply chain readiness, the tool by itself, and multiple tiers. We went through that today. We have another online assessment, which is more geared towards risk maturity, risk appetite, and operational propensity, which is culture. We'll be talking about that through Christmas and so forth in another series. Remember, we bring solution platforms that do heavy lifting for risk alerts, mapping, and so forth, and we do journal consulting. So any questions, just feel free to reach out. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jim.
Hey, Greg, just before we wrap up, there was one comment by Pharaoh that going back to the CEO graph, there's almost the same decrease in executive confidence levels in 2009, 2010, and 2019 and 2020. What could be the contributing factors? Was his comment. I know you have a good response to that. So
well, it's 2009, 2010. That was a little bit different. That was that's way back. 19 and 20. That was the confidence was degrading because of the dialogue of the pandemic. Nobody knew exactly. That was unknown unknowns. And so you have a lot of confidence being degraded there. I mean, there's so many external variables associated with CEO's opinion and their confidence. We don't get all the data from the conference board. We don't get all the algorithms. They just share with us the executive summary. So I hope I answered a portion of Pharaoh's question.
I'd just add that 2009 was the housing crisis, obviously, and that was more of a financially driven crisis. And 2019-20 obviously was COVID, but these are risk events. That's what's in common. So when you see upheaval in the world and you see people making decisions and making more inward decisions, and your supply chains starting to get choked, that's what we're seeing now. China's still locked down, and Russia, we're at war. So I think that's why the confidence is low, inflation's rising, and the Fed keeps raising interest rates, causing inflation to go up even higher. So, there's got to be an end to this. We got to find some stabilization. Until we find some stabilization, we're going to be continuing to have this uncertainty that's been created by this set of conditions. So with that, that's my 2 cents anyways. With that, I will close it out here with Tier 3. Thanks for hanging on here. We will be having our Tier 3 discussion like this on the 19th, and that's very, very interesting because we really get into the details of annual operating planning and really bringing it to that next level. When you get to the point where you don't know what to do next, you've made some progress, but you're kind of stuck and stymied in what area to focus on next. The Tier 3 assessment is a very good assessment to get you that next level of engagement in your organization in supply chain and make sure you're going in the right direction. With that, Greg, as we close out, closing comments?
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for attending. The question, we'll pose a question. Why are we providing these services to you? 3 things. We want to give your supply chain a booster shot in this time of crisis. All right. We want to accelerate your time to value in this time of crisis. And we want to help you survive and thrive in this VUCA world. So with that, again, thanks for attending and thanks for hanging in there with us.
Thanks so much. And just remember, this is a great way to gain alignment in your organization very quickly, not a lot of effort, but you're going to get a lot out of it for this Tier 2 assessment. Understanding your strengths and weaknesses and gaining alignment in a single voice in your organization will drive success. And with that, we bid you farewell, and we wish you all the best for the holidays.